past few decades, serial murder has become a cultural phenomenon, painted in the bright colors of media and Hollywood blockbusters. Through the lens of sensationalized depictions, we're now dealing with false narratives regarding exactly what serial killers are and how they operate. These inaccurate representations can be detrimental to our understanding of the psychology behind serial killers and the true nature of their crimes. The internet's fascination with true crime has spawned caricatures of the serial killer, perpetuating clichés and reinforcing preconceived notions that don't match reality. The truth is that serial killers span a vast spectrum of personalities, appearances, and motivations, so it's important to take a step back, look beneath the surface, and realize that serial killers are not the evil masterminds or tortured artists that the media portrays. They're barely any different from the average person. So in this video, we're debunking 10 common serial killer myths. Serial killers are evil geniuses. This is one of the most perpetuated myths of all. The notion that serial killers are criminal masterminds with superior intellects is nothing more than a figment of Hollywood's imagination. A study from Radford University in Virginia found that the median serial killer IQ was actually only 89. In other words, no smarter or dumber than the average person. Furthermore, IQ has no correlation to the success of the serial killer. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, had a below-average IQ in the low 80s, but he was still one of the most prolific killers in history. Instead, success is determined by a killer's foresight, forensic countermeasures, and God-given luck. Three things that IQ has no bearing on. The biggest beneficiary of this myth is America's boogeyman Ted Bundy. Movies and documentaries have elevated Ted Bundy to evil genius status, when in actual fact, he was barely above average in terms of intelligence. All serial killers are psychopaths. The term psychopath is closely associated with serial killers, but psychopath is not a blanket term that can be applied to every killer in the history books. Psychopathy is a mental health disorder characterized by a lack of empathy and remorse, and a disregard for the rights of others. It's a complex disorder with a vast range of symptoms that vary from person to person. While most serial killers certainly display aspects of psychopathy, they may not display all of them. In fact, some serial killers may not display any of them at all. A 2005 study by Columbia University found that 86% of serial killers met the recognized standard for psychopathy, which is indeed a large majority. If we compare this against the known 770 serial killers that have operated in America since the 1980s, this means there have been over 100 serial killers who cannot be labeled psychopaths. Serial killers are born with a desire to kill. One of the oldest questions in criminal psychology concerns whether serial killers are born or made. The truth, as anticlimactic as it might be, lies somewhere in the middle. Psychopaths are undoubtedly born with their condition. No amount of medical or therapeutic intervention can stop a psychopath from craving power and domination, but the degree to which psychopaths possess these traits vary widely. Not every psychopath goes on to become a cold-blooded murderer. Some go on to have ordinary lives without ever harming another soul. Therefore, there must be other factors at play that transform someone into a serial killer. One such factor is childhood abuse. A large majority of serial killers experience violent upbringings, which then distorts the psychopath's outlook on other human beings and further instills a deep resentment that they might spend the rest of their lives trying to undo. No one is born a future serial killer, but a combination of genetic predispositions and social factors can create the perfect recipe for one to grow. Serial killers have a killer gene. In line with our last point, one popular myth concerns that of a killer gene, a genetic abnormality that compels someone to commit murder. No such gene exists, although discussions around a condition known as Jacobs syndrome has touched on the subject. Jacobs syndrome is a rare genetic condition that occurs when an individual has an XXY chromosome makeup, which is caused by the father passing on an additional Y chromosome to his male offspring. This extra Y chromosome leads to the body producing excessive amounts of estrogen. leading some to theorize that it could be responsible for extreme violent behavior, as was the case with infamous serial killers Bobby Joe Long and Richard Speck. However, scientific evidence has since disproved this notion. Males with Jacobs syndrome are no more likely to exhibit violent tendencies than those without it. The only link between the two appears to be that those affected may experience embarrassing physical side effects, such as acne, increased breast size, and higher-pitched voices, feelings of humiliation that may lead to resentment towards others. What if a homicidal maniac was able to commit murder from miles away? What if they could lay a trap for someone, so by the time an unfortunate soul happened to cross it, their perpetrator would be long gone? Such was the case in Japan in 1985. The vending machine killer. Serial killers travel widely and kill interstate. Another popular myth is the murderous nomad, the methodical serial killer who travels far and wide to kill. However, this is far from the reality. The vast majority of serial killers operate within a defined comfort zone, a distinct geographic area, usually anchored by a residence or place of employment. They rarely travel interstate to find or dispose of victims, instead, creating personal hunting grounds that they can navigate like the backs of their hands. While there are still a small number of serial killers who occasionally kill in multiple states, their interstate travel usually arises out of necessity. They might be chronically homeless or work jobs that require regular travel like truck drivers or military work. It's usually their lifestyles that afford them these opportunities rather than a conscious effort to avoid detection. Serial killers are mostly men. It's a common misconception that serial killers are exclusively male, but the truth is that female serial killers are more common than we think. In fact, women make up 17% of all serial homicides in the US, a percentage higher than their representation in all other types of murder cases. This is an astonishing statistic, especially when the common image of a serial killer is lone white male. Furthermore, the differences between male and female serial killers are even more pronounced when looking at their respective motivations. Research shows that the majority of female serial killers are motivated by financial gain, while male serial killers tend to be driven by a wide range of different factors. The difference in motivations suggests that female serial killers are more likely to be acting out of necessity than out of a pathological desire for power, control, and sexual gratification, a finding that further complicates the popular understanding of serial killers. Serial killers want to get caught. Another fictional trope is the guilt-ridden killer with a subconscious desire for the police to end their reign of terror. However, this is entirely unheard of in the real world. We've seen instances of serial killers contacting the police, taunting the press with letters, even directly contacting victims' families. We even saw the lipstick killer, William Herons, write a message at one of his crime scenes begging police to catch him. These acts may be construed as unconscious desires to be caught, but they're really just unnecessary, self-serving ways for a serial killer to heighten the thrill of the hunt. They might want recognition for their crimes to boost their egos, but it's exceptionally rare for a serial killer to actually aid their own capture. It has happened on a handful of occasions, such as the case of co-ed killer Edmund Kemper, who turned himself in because he said that serial killing had become a pure waste of time. But more often than not, murderers are caught because of tireless investigative work, or they become sloppy and make mistakes. After his capture, Ted Bundy told an interviewer, "The first time, you're careful. By the 13th time, you can't remember where you left the lug wrench." Behavioral profiling is the best way to catch killers. Criminal profiling has been touted as a miraculous tool by TV shows that romanticize the job. But the truth is that geographical profiling and trace evidence are much more accurate tools for locating suspects. Since psychology profiling is far from an exact science, it leaves too much open to interpretation and error. It makes it easy for investigators to be led down a wrong path. And even the forefathers of criminal profiling have said that it needs to be used alongside other investigative techniques for maximum benefit. Serial killers are either organized or disorganized. TV shows and films that deal with psychological profiling will have you believe that serial killers fit into one of two boxes. organized or disorganized. Organized offenders are usually seen as methodical and calculating, while disorganized offenders are portrayed as reckless maniacs who lash out in uncontrollable rage. The truth, however, is that very few serial killers fit neatly into either one of these boxes. Organized and disorganized are two very broad categories, so it's not uncommon for the traits associated with them to overlap. The FBI do indeed classify serial murderers as either organized or disorganized, but very few historic or modern serial killers fit firmly into the disorganized category. Almost every known serial killer skews toward the organized classification, because the overwhelming majority of them show awareness of their crimes and take conscious measures to stay undetected. It's almost entirely unheard of to find a purely disorganized offender, with virtually every serial killer in the history books being a mixture of the two classifications. Serial killers can never stop. Serial killers are commonly portrayed in Hollywood as having an insatiable urge to kill, an unstoppable compulsion that can't be quenched. While many serial killers find it difficult to stop killing, this compulsion can be likened to an addiction. With enough intervention, they could stop themselves killing. They just don't want to. There have been many instances of serial killers going extensive periods without murdering. When Dennis Rader was caught in 2005, he hadn't killed anyone for 14 years. When Joseph D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, was caught in 2019, he'd been inactive for 32 years. Sometimes external circumstances such as family life or imprisonment put a stop to their killing sprees. Other times, they make conscious decisions to stop. It's not always clear why, but over the years, countless serial killers have simply managed to fade away. That concludes our debunking of 10 serial killer myths. Did we miss anything? What other myths need discrediting? Let us know in the comments.